This is a pretty typical application process in the United States. So you're going to look at, gathering your application material. Pretty much every application that I know is going to be online. And so you're going to have an application fee, written essays. There's going to be a resume or CV, letters of recommendation, transcripts, typically an interview, and then testing scores like a GMAT or GRE for business schools or general programs. And then you're also going to need a TOEFL or IELTS score as well. And these are English as a second language tests. And I'll go through all of these with you. And so the first thing we're going to talk about is the essay. Please make sure you read the questions carefully. We do understand that you might be applying to more than one school. And so you just want to make sure that the essay question that you are submitting actually is you're answering the question. Make sure when you're going through that you're really reviewing that carefully, because I will say Anya and I and the rest of us on the admissions committee, we read every single essay. We read everything that's part of it. So you really want to make sure that you're taking care of that. You also want to make sure that you're aware of minimums or maximums. If there's a minimum word count or a maximum word count, you want to make sure that you're staying within that, because you don't want anything, being cut off if it's too long, or you don't want it to be too short, if they do have a minimum. Obviously, be aware of proper spelling and grammar. You want to make sure that you're spelling the words correctly and using proper grammar and punctuation. And here's my hidden tip. Here's my secret tip for you. And that's something I want you to do when you're writing your essay. After you write your essay, I want you to review it several times on your own. Review it a couple of times, read through it, put it down for a day, go back to it, and then review it again. And then after that, I want you to take the essay and I want you to give it to somebody who you know and trust and have them read the essay. But here's what I want you also to do. Don't give them the question. Give them the essay without the question, and then I want you to have them, after they've read the essay, say, what question am I trying to answer? If they can give you the answer to the question that you're trying to answer, and it's fairly close or all right on, then you know you've done a good job with that essay. If the question that they think you're answering isn't close, then you know that you should probably go back and rewrite that essay and look to make sure that you're being more specific, because details are important. This really can be the difference to maybe you being accepted, or maybe even the difference between getting a scholarship or not. So really make sure. So that's my tip for making sure when you're going through the essays. Just trying to skip to the, whoops. We got out here. Maybe I seem to be having a hard time controlling this. If somebody could help me maybe do this here. Yeah, thank you, Nanor.
Okay, 1 second, I got it. Let's see.
Yeah.
We're on resume tips, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Nanor.
Yeah.
And it may be, yeah, and I'll see if I can, I'll use these controls down here and see if that'll work.
Okay.
All right, so resume tips. So first things first, so this is where that communication with the admissions office is going to be really critical, because some universities are very specific on whether they want to receive a resume or a CV. In Europe, pretty typical is a CV, curriculum vitae, and basically those can be several pages long. They're very detailed about your entire professional and sometimes even personal life. And so you want to make sure that you understand whether a university accepts a CV or not, because a typical American resume is usually 1 to 2 pages maximum, really depending on the level of experience you have. So by reaching out and finding out what they accept, that's going to be really critical. So that's where that communication is going to be important. Whichever format you decide to use, just make sure it's easy to read format. You don't want to add in a lot of different colors, a lot of different types of fonts. You want to make sure it's block lettered, very simple, very easy to read, because we're reading hundreds, sometimes thousands of applications in a cycle. And so it's really important that we're not struggling to understand the type of skill sets that you have, whether we're not struggling to try to read it, again, because we want to make sure it's clear and concise and we know who you are. If you use any type of industry terms, please make sure you define them. Even if in your particular industry they're very typical, make sure you define them. You know, we get applications from all different types of people with different types of backgrounds and work in different types of industries. Just make sure if it's not a really, really, you know, common term that you define that for us. And the same thing with an abbreviation. If you use an abbreviation, please make sure that you define that somewhere in your resume or in your essay as well. You define those types of you define those industry abbreviations or terms. And so, for example, MBA, very typical abbreviation. Everybody knows what that means. But if again, if you're using something in the industry, just at least define it once as you're going through. Obviously, again, proper spelling and grammar, just like on the essay. Put some contact information on there. Sometimes we'll have professors or someone like that who are trying to match people up. And so just make sure you put your contact information on there. And then also, depending on the type of degree that you are applying to, you know, if you're applying to maybe our Masters of Analytics, for example, make sure you list those achievements that are relative to your program of interest. So if you've worked on a particular project that involved analytics or statistics, list that on there. If you're applying to an MBA program, make sure you list leadership opportunities, leadership experiences, team leadership experiences that you've had as you go through that. So make sure you put that on there to address and connect it to what you're looking to do within your particular program of interest. All right, we're going to go on to the next slide here, I hope. Let's see if we can go on to the, oh my goodness. Nanor, would you mind controlling the slides for me? I'm having a hard time connecting with it here. I apologize.
Yeah, sorry about that. I got it.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Yep. Thank you. So we'll go to the letters of recommendation on the next one. So the letters of recommendation. So these are really important because this is someone else's view of you. And so you want to make sure that you choose your letters of recommendation and your recommenders really carefully. First off, you want to confirm with the university how they want to receive those recommendations. So some universities want to receive a letter directly from the recommender or an email directly from the recommender. Other colleges and universities, they may have a link that they want to send your recommender to fill out a recommendation form. That's how we do it here at Bentley. And so you want to reach out to that university and find out the best way that they want to receive that. Once you know that, then you want to make sure that you let your recommender know how they're going to receive that and what they need to do. And also, when you're choosing your recommender, please choose carefully. Really want to make sure you're choosing someone that can speak to your strengths and your abilities. I'll give you a really quick example. In the past, I've had recommenders who maybe gave me their CEO as their recommender. But the problem is that their CEO didn't work directly with them. And so the details and the information received was not very helpful in us making a determination of their abilities because they didn't work directly with that. Now, I understand that this person was trying to use the CEO's position and recommendation as something positive for them, but in reality, it actually ended up being a negative because we didn't get the details. So when you're choosing a recommender, you want to choose somebody that you work directly with, a manager, a boss. If you don't want your manager or boss to know that you're applying to graduate school, maybe use a client or a consultant or a coworker, somebody that you trust. Again, somebody that's at your level or above. Do not choose anybody who works for you if you have people that work for you or your family members. I'm going to assume that your parents, that your spouse all think that you're a great candidate. Really try to stay away from family members. However, if you work for a family company, just, that can be a little bit tricky. Reach out to the admissions committee, or excuse me, reach out to the admissions department, and they can maybe give you some suggestions on how to handle that. Again, make sure you ask your recommenders before. If you notice any hesitation, don't use them. And also give them some time. You don't want them to feel pressured and rushed. Usually, I would say 1 to 2 weeks is a good amount of time to write a recommendation, especially if they're busy. But you don't want to say, hey, hey, Gordon, can you get this recommendation to me by tomorrow? That might be a little pressure, and then you might not get the well thought out, well-written recommendation letter that you were hoping to get. So give them some time. And also make sure that they can highlight your recommendations, make sure that your recommender can highlight your skills that you want to highlight within your program. So again, leadership, analytics, financial skills for whatever type of program that you're applying to. So we'll go on to the next slide. So the transcripts, you know, I worked with a lot of universities there in Spain, so a lot of them will provide you English transcripts. If they don't, you must get them officially translated through through a company. They cannot translate them on your own. It must be an official translation. So you just want to make sure you reach out to an organization. We use WES, WES.org is a great one that we use, but there's quite a few others out there. And again, this is where you can reach out to the admissions committee, and they can work with you on our admissions department. They can help you finding out what they might use as well. Please note that you must be able to provide original documentation. Some applications will accept unofficial transcripts like we do, but at some point you are going to need those official ones. So make sure you get those and make sure they are in a sealed envelope or that they come directly from your university. You must submit transcripts from all universities attended. If you did a semester abroad, if you transferred halfway through your program, please make sure you provide all transcripts. And again, same thing, time. Give yourself enough time to collect all those transcripts, especially during this pandemic. You want to make sure that you have enough time to collect all those because it can take a little bit longer time now, especially with so many people working from home. And again, reach out to that admissions department, see if they will accept those unofficial transcripts as part of the application. That can also save you a little bit of time. If your university is at a different grading scale, here in the US, it's pretty typical. Most schools are on a 4.0 grading scale. So you could get like a 3.7 would be like an A minus, and a 4.0 would be an A, the best score you can get, or a 3.0 would be a score of B. If your school is outside that, provide us with a grading key. That can be really helpful also. However, if you do the official translations, usually they'll do that into, they'll also translate your grades as well. But if not, just provide us a grading key, just so we understand, you know, if you're on a 10-point scale, a 5-point, a 20-point, whatever it is, that we'll know what that is. We'll go on to the next one. So the interview tips, proper attire, make sure you're dressed properly for an interview. Even though your interview is probably gonna be like this over Zoom or Skype or some type of video format, make sure you're dressed appropriately for an interview as you're going through. Also make sure you have a couple of questions ready to ask that are thoughtful and about the program, that shows that you've done your research on that particular institution. Perhaps you ask about a particular course, a particular professor, or something real specific within the program. But have those questions available and ready to ask during the interview process. Make sure you show up on time. You know, if you're applying in the, in the distant future, maybe 2021, 2022, and are able to finally get together again, if you have an in-person interview, make sure you show up on time, but don't show up too early. Usually 15 minutes is a good kind of way, but no more than that. You don't want to put pressure on them to go up, and don't be late, whether it's online, in person, whatever it is, don't be late. That can be really tough. And it sets a bad first impression. If you're in an interview like this, where it's a video interview, make sure you're in a quiet place where you have a good internet connection and not distracted. Quiet place within your house, if you can go to an office building, but don't do it in a coffee shop. You don't want to do it where you may be distracted or anything like that. Make sure it's a nice quiet place. If it's in person, bring extra copies of your resume, your CV, just in case they have other people who may be interviewing you. And just note, it's okay to take notes. I love it when students take notes during my interviews. I think that's great. So feel free to take notes. And this is really important. Here is my secret tip when it comes to interviewing. This can really help you stand out. Follow up with a thank you email within 24 hours. So make sure you get the contact information of the person that's doing your interview, whether that's someone like Anya and I, or maybe an alumni, whoever's doing that interview. Get their email address and follow up with a thank you. Doesn't have to be long, but it can just be something along the lines of, hey, thank you so much, Gordon, for meeting with me today. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot about the program, and I got a great insight into how I can be a great fit for your program, something along those lines. This can really help stand out, and it also helps make you memorable. Anya and I have done hundreds, I've done thousands of interviews in my career. And I can tell you, the ones that do send me that thank you email, that does help them stand out when it comes time for decisions. Next slide, please. The GMAT or GRE, so the test. Excuse me. Give yourself enough time to study when it comes to this test. If you end up having to take it, give yourself enough time. You don't want to rush through it. Use those online resources. You can reach out to Education USA. They're such an amazing resource. They have study material, or maybe they can direct you to specific websites that are really helpful, because there are a lot of websites out there that say, they're this or that, or what other thing, they're official sites. They'll know the official sites to send you to, because some services are paid, but others are free. So just make sure, talk to them. They can point you out to those good resources online. And again, they do have resources at Education USA as well, at their centers, books and things that once they're open that you can use. If you need to take it again, that's fine. It's okay to take it more than once if you have to. Now, when it comes to what type of test to take, again, make sure you reach out to the university to find out what type of test that they take, whether that's the GMAT, the GRE, the law school, if it's LSAT, something along those lines. Excuse me. So make sure you reach out and find out what they prefer, but also find out, what type of test scores that you need. Do they have a minimum, a maximum, something along those lines? And then find out when the test dates are as well. So a lot of these exams are being offered online at home right now. And so that can be really critical for you also to find out how that is being administered and what steps you need to take or resources you'll need to take these at home during this current pandemic as you go through. If you're obviously applying for any type of analytical type program, make sure you're focusing on the overall score, but also make sure that particularly you're focusing on those quantitative scores if you're applying to an analytics type program. So that was that. We'll go on to the next slide, please. English as a second language testing. Again, to try to figure out what test is going to work best for you, there's several different types of ones out there. Probably the two most popular ones here in the United States is the TOEFL and the IELTS exam. The IELTS is the IELTS. Those are probably two of the most predominant ones, but there are others as well. So reach out to your institution, find out, what one they prefer, and also any type of minimum score that they require. So what type of minimum scores that they require. And again, if you need some help doing research or trying to find good opportunities to practice, again, reach out to your Education USA Center. They can be a great resource for helping you find information on that. If you can, find some native speakers to practice with. Practice, practice, practice. If you can't, maybe look for some online videos of speakers, like a TED Talk or some speeches or something along those lines. Also read a lot in English, but make sure you're reading at a high level. You could read things like the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, trade journals, university textbooks, something of a higher level of standard. You don't want to be reading basic stuff. You want to make sure that you're really challenging yourself. Again, practice your articulation, practice your pronunciation of words. That can be really important. Know your test dates, and again, know which tests each university takes as you go through. And again, just really make sure you hit those minimum scores to make sure you're giving yourself the best opportunity to be accepted. Because for a lot of schools, the English as a second language test, that can be a cutoff point. That if you're below this score, regardless of the rest of your application, you might not be considered. So know what those minimum scores are as you go through the ESL testing. So we'll go on to the next one.